President Cyril Ramaphosa had promised to trim down his cabinet. Well, that's not the case when you look at the recent announcements. He added 2 portfolios, electricity and planning, monitoring and evaluation. On top of that, 3 other portfolios now have 2 deputy ministers each. Let's discuss this now with SANCO's Donovan William, who joins us virtually from Paul Petersburg this morning. Donovan, thanks for your time this morning. There was a lot of talk about the president potentially cutting down the size of his cabinet, which for a very long time has been called bloated, along with many other words or descriptions that have been used. And even the president kind of alluded to a restructuring, I think was the word that they used. But we really didn't see any kind of cutting down or restructuring or getting rid of dead wood, whatever you want to call it. What did your organization make of this latest announcement?
Well, thank you, Marcel, and hopefully I will resonate with the viewers. More than anything, I think the president even said when he announced that this isn't a complete restructure or reshuffle, etc. There is a report that will come, so forth. But, I'm from the Eastern Cape originally. That's where I grew up in. And my mom still lives in the Eastern Cape. A big shout out to her if she's watching or listening. And I also, just like many members of SANCO, have worked in the public service. So I'm not going to give an analysis or give a view from SANCO that talks about the palace politics in political parties that seems to be quite enjoyed. Not at all, And the reason I raise this, it's also in the insert you just had before when you're looking at the Nahawu strike. And so forth, the general public service strike that is definitely looming, etc., is that as South Africans, we expected a sense of urgency. We expect a sense of urgency from government and the president in particular. This cabinet reshuffle does not reflect that urgency. We want to light the proverbial fire under government, and we are not seeing that with this cabinet reshuffle. Even with whoever. So it's not to zoom in onto the actual deployees or those who have been put forward, from the deputy president to the new ministers and so forth, and the changing of deputy ministers. But what is it in their tenure previously that you can say that our public service is going to change dramatically? As Minister Kivett, who's now the minister, when she was in the Eastern Cape, and that's why I make the reference to the Eastern Cape, when she served there, what tells us that she's going to come and she's going to change the public service? She's going to change the structure, because even it's not just the name, it's not just the portfolios, bloated or otherwise. It's what is going to change, because you can't be doing the same thing. And this cabinet reshuffle, the brief to the ministers, is not saying they're going to change them. And I just want to talk about the myth of the wage bill, because it is a myth that because we like throwing things like bloated wage bill, etc. And with the strike even now. One, trade unions, quite honestly, don't look for community support like they used to. Previously, you would have community support trade unions by boycotting goods where workers were on strike. Nowadays, communities are seen as part of the enemy of trade unions when they go on strike. Trade unions, as anger, they kick over bins, they even loot, hawkers are hurt, etc., and they make enemies of communities. They block roads at times even. And whereas they should be wanting solidarity from communities, you don't have that occurring. But the myth of the wage bill is that we talk about the public service wage bill. The public service wage bill is not large. It's honestly not large. The public sector wage bill is large. And the public sector wage bill is where you get all these state-owned enterprises and agencies, etc. That is a large wage bill. That's where you have the really high salaries. That's where a director was employed and gets a huge salary. It's higher than the president, higher than any ministers and so forth. But we don't talk about that public sector wage bill. We continue to have these boards when the real power lies with the DG and the minister, because they approve everything, they sign everything, but they don't make actual changes. And that brings us to the Minister of Electricity. And he's engagements with the public thus far have been very, very impressive. I mean, I think everybody has said it. He talks with the technical know-how. He comes across that he's not going to overpromise, but he seems to have his eye on what he could do because it's all about load shedding, etc. Unfortunately, though, and we are wondering, how is this going to work? Has government itself, the president himself, got a handle of how you're going to manage all state-owned enterprises, these which are sucking from the national fiscus, this large wage bill that we are talking about, because that's where the real money goes, right? That's where you have a large wage bill. And what is it going to be now? It's going to be one minister, one SOE. So is there going to be a minister of Transnet next? Because Transnet has also got problems. Because when I listened very carefully, and we listened in SANCO very, very carefully, to what the Minister of Electricity was saying, and we enjoyed his inputs. However, he was still sticking within the plan. And so therefore, the macroeconomic issues with Eskom is not going to be touched on. And what is that macroeconomic problem or matter? The macroeconomic matter is that there's been a perennial underinvestment, criminal almost, by the shareholder, that is government, in Eskom. They've been expecting Eskom to expand and the bill to be footed by ordinary citizens like myself and yourself, so ordinary taxpayers, and hoping that the private sector will invest. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's been over 15 years of underinvestment into Eskom. So how are you going to really put matters correctly? And we haven't seen anything in that regard. That lack of investment.
If I could just come in there, do you think then it's fair to say that the reshuffle, if I could just bring us back to the cabinet, the changes to the cabinet, because I sometimes think the term reshuffle is not the best descriptive for what we see happen every time the president stands up and makes these changes. And we always look forward to these changes with so much hope, and then it's the hope that kills you in the end. Is it unfair then to say that this has all been about optics? I mean, the criticism when the president announced that he was planning to announce a minister of electricity inside the presidency, the criticism was, but you've had all of the human resources already in the cabinet to fix the electricity and the power crisis, both at Eskom, when it comes to renewables, both within public enterprises and mineral resources portfolios, and that this is now just the president wanting to be seen to be doing something and putting a nice ribbon around it and saying, right, here's your guy that's going to look after power, after the electricity crisis. Let's see him put his best foot forward, make very strong statements and sound like he knows what he's talking about. But the criticism before that was, but you already had all of these human resources and technical resources to fix the issue already, but you didn't do that because there hasn't been the will to do it.
No, I think that would be a bit unfair that we leave it just on optics. I think there's a genuine commitment from the president, including the deployees, whichever minister, to do the correct thing. I think there's a genuine, real commitment. But are they thinking and looking at the matters in the correct way, or doing the same thing and hoping it will? That is where the problem lies. And this is where one would raise that, and this is what was coming to why we think there's a lack of urgency. There's a lack of courage to invest in the people of South Africa. Our plan on development, our plan on accelerating growth and so forth is based on natural resources, private sector investments, and foreign capital. But if you look at countries that have been successful, and I can go to stark contrast like Rwanda in Africa or Australia in the South Pacific, all those countries, they don't have our natural resources. If they invested in the people of their country, they had the courage to do so. Our leadership across political parties, and in particular government, has not taken the chance to really invest in our people. They invest in processes, they invest so that the private sector can hopefully invest, and they hope that foreign capital will hear those signals and come through. We haven't had an unapologetic investment in our people. And Eskom, or the Minister of Electricity, or even in the public service itself, we have seen this time and time again. It's a perennial underinvestment in the people and institutions run by people. And that's why as communities, we always feel hard done by. We always feel that we need to tighten our belts just so that business or foreign capital can come in. And the Minister of Electricity is in a sense proving it. And we hope he will do well, because we think he will. We think there's this is not just optics, but we do not believe that the urgency on putting everything correct is there within this cabinet reshuffle, and you shouldn't expect it to be.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. That's SANCO's Donovan William speaking to us virtually. They're from Paul Petersburg. We thank him for his insight this afternoon.